This video will review a lot of the data entry components of Persimmony. So the first screen that you see upon logging in is this basic client roster. This is where you can look up an existing client based on the field at the top of the screen. I also have some other buttons to the right, which indicate different modules that I can use for Persimmony. Since I have an admin access, you may not see all the buttons that are here. You might not see any of them, or you might only have reports, for example. So these buttons will change based on how you use the system and your security access. So an important part when you log in is to first make sure that you're in the correct program, which you will most of the time be, especially if you only have access to one program. But some of you might have access to multiple, so just confirm that the correct program is selected at the bottom so that you can work within the right group. If you need to change your program, of course, you can do so by clicking this white box at the bottom, default program, to select a different one. I'm going to use a training program for this video. So if I want to look up an existing client, I can use any of the fields at the top of the screen, such as first name, last, the client number, which is the leftmost column. It's a random ID that's unique to every client and assigned by Persimmony. You can use the client code, which I'll review a little bit later, but it's a unique code that you can give to every client to help you look them up. So a lot of programs use initials of the community worker to be able to look up clients with a certain code. The client code is up for your program to decide how to use it. You can look up a client by their birth date. So I'm just typing in the box and then pressing return. And I can undo that filter just by deleting it and pressing return again. And you can also look them up based on their family ID number. This is another automatically generated ID that Persimmony assigns for every family. To the right of these fields are some buttons that are what I was using my keyboard for. So I can type in a way to search for a client and click find if I want. I just use return because it's a little bit easier. You can also filter this client list based on those who are active, and I see my number went down, or those who are exited only. For now, I'll keep them on both. Now at this point, you can open up one of these existing clients by double-clicking their name, or you can create a new client with the new client button down below. So I'll go ahead and I will start the process of adding a new client. Once I click there, I see that I just need to enter their basic information, which is their full name, birth date, and gender. If you do not have their birth date, the default that we use is January 1st, 1900. So once I click OK, it'll take me to a screen. Well, first it says there is another similar client that's found. So Persimmony will flag if there's any potential duplicates. So I'm going to say, actually, we can disregard the duplicate. We'll just start a new client. Most of the times you won't see that screen because it's rare for a duplicate to pop up, but it does happen. Now I see my blank client record. Now at this point, I'm going to enter all the relevant information for this client. Their program start date refers to the first date that they participated in your programming. And their consent date is the date that they signed the consent form. The program start date and consent date may be the same, they may be different. When I put in the consent from date, the consent to date automatically populated for 10 years. Next, we have the client code that I was referring to. And this is any identifier I want to give this client to help me look them up in the future. So I will assign this client the client code of blue. And that way I can pull up any client with the client code of blue from that initial screen. Next, we want to indicate the client type. It's important because we use this field for reporting quite a bit, so we encourage you to fill out these fields as completely as possible. Since I selected parent here, I now specify the type of parent. If I were to have selected, for example, other, I could select that this participant is the babysitter or an older sibling or a volunteer or other client types. So I will change this back to the parent. We indicate their race and ethnicity. And a lot of times this information will be on a client intake form. Their contact information is not used by First 5, but we encourage you to fill it out completely because it may help with your own records and your own mailing lists. So you can fill out the contact information below. It is important that you complete the zip code because we use that to report to the state. Other information down here can be found in the intake form, other forms that you use to collect the information. Now, once the basic information is completed, at this point you can add a new activity. The different activity types are service, referral, and assessment. Now, I'll start with adding a service. A service is any one-time or specific service that you provide that one client. When I click my service list, I'll see my options, and this list will look different based on what program you have. So this is just a sample of different service types. So if I wanted to indicate that I provided health insurance information as my service, I select it from my list, and at the bottom, I just indicate the date that the service occurred on. So I fill this out completely. Oftentimes the start and end date will be the same, and if that's the case, end date can remain blank. You indicate the duration of that service, so perhaps this health insurance session took me 1 hour. I'll put a 1 for duration, and this is already indicated as hours. I can change it to minutes if I wanted to. And the count will usually be 1 because I'm adding 1 service record for this service. Now I'll press OK, and I see that the service has been added to my client record for this client. I can continue to add more services, even from the same day, as appropriate. If you have someone volunteering, you can also add their volunteer hours as a service this way. So I can indicate 3 volunteer hours for this participant through a service. And as I add activities, the list grows on their client record. So I can quickly look over and see the history of all of their activities just by looking at the right side of the client screen. Another type of activity is a referral. So referrals that are made to outside organizations or other First 5 organizations can be tracked using this referral radio button. So I indicate the date that the referral occurred on, and I hit OK. Persimmony will remind me that I need to have received consent for this referral, so we assume that the parent is consenting to this referral happening. So I'll say yes. It also asks me if I'd like to add other family members to this referral. At this point, my client doesn't have other family members tracked in the system, so I'll just say no for now. Now, I have 2 options for referrals. A lot of my referrals will go to external agencies. These are programs that are not really affiliated with First Five, or if they are, they don't use Persimmony for client tracking. If you're not sure whether the referral goes an external agency or First Five agency, go with the external agency because this is more likely the correct option. This just indicates in Persimmony that a referral was sent to one of these organizations. So let's say I sent a referral to 4Cs. I can select that from my list, and my next step is just to hit exit. That's all you need to do for that referral. So it's a pretty simple process. Now, if I wanted to add a referral, I'll add another one. And this time I'm going to select the First Five agency. What this means is that if I select one of these options, it will actually send an internal referral through Persimmony to that program. So that means you will only be using this First Five agency for programs that use Persimmony and will accept the referral through Persimmony. If you're not sure about the difference between these, please contact your program staff at First Five for clarification. The last type of activity that we can add here is an assessment. And this is where you will add any forms. That includes ASQs, intake forms, the volunteer intake, any assessment or form that is filled out, any questionnaire will be added through the assessment. So once I find the assessment that I want to add, I indicate my assessment date, and then I'm taken to the form. I go ahead and I select responses to my form one by one. You can use the tab to tab through the questions. And I want to make sure on the top left, I see the different pages of my form. I want to make sure these are all completely filled out before I save. So once I fill out all these 4 pages of this assessment, I will click exit, and exit will save my form for me. If you do not see the ASQ or ASQ SE as an option for an assessment, keep in mind those only pop up for children under the age of 6. So it might mean that you're on a client who's above 6 years old. Now, this is most of what you will be entering for a specific client. At this point, I've added the parent, but I can continue on and add a family member, like a child, to this client record. So at the bottom, I see add family member, and that's where I can add a child or a spouse or someone else affiliated with this family member. So if I click here on add family member, it asks me, do you want to create another family member? And their demographic information will be carried over. So I put in the new name. I can either keep the same last name or put a new one. I fill in their birth date and gender, and then a new screen pops up for that baby. Now I see the parent record at the top of the screen that I can click back and forth with pretty easily. This is the client record that I just made. I can click back to the baby as well. I see that both of these clients have the same family ID, but a unique client ID, and that's how Persimmony assigns them. So just as we did before, we can continue on to add their information to the client record. We want to make sure these are completed as completely as possible. So again, I can continue on and add activities, services, referrals, just as I did before. So I'll go ahead and I will add the ASQ assessment. So similar to what we did on the parent record, we just indicate the date, and then we fill out all of these fields completely. I'll leave the blank for now. But once they are completed and you hit exit, you'll see that this ASQ summary was saved here. Now, if I hit exit on the client record, I'm now back on my full list of participants. If you remember, I assigned both of those participants the client code of blue. So if I were to type that in there, now I see the clients that I just made. This is a really helpful way to track local ID numbers or any identifiers you might use for your program specifically. Other things that you can do in addition to adding information to the client record is that you can also create group services and enter performance measures from the links to the right. Some programs will not be required to add group services or community events or performance measures. You may only be using Persimmony for the client tracking. And if that's the case, you'll primarily be staying in the screens that we just reviewed. If you are adding group workshops or group services, you can continue watching and we'll review that as well now. So some of your programs may hold workshops or group services to track 24/7 dad workshops, seeds workshops, 10 steps, a variety of different programming. And workshops are tracked through this group services link. Now this process does require a few steps, so I would recommend either watching this video, using this video the first few times that you enter group services, or using documentation. So to add a workshop, I'm going to select my group services. And again, I see a list of all the previous workshops that I've conducted. Now, I want to create a new workshop, let's say. So I'm going to go first to set up groups. Now, adding a workshop in Persimmony is 2 steps. First, you need to set up the group, and then you need to add the service to the group. So I'll name my new group 24/7 Dad, July 2019, and hit return. Now I need to tell Persimmony who attended this workshop that I'm setting up. So I see a list of all my clients on the right. I can select multiple just by clicking on their names, and then clicking Add Selected Client to Group at the bottom. And I now see on the left, I have more members. I can even look up a specific member using the first and last name field at the top by typing their name in and pressing enter. And I can continue to add more clients, add selected client to group. Let's say now I've completed selecting my clients for the group. At this point, I can go to exit, which will take me to the last screen. I know that's kind of a scary button to click at this point, but now I see the group that I just created, 24/7 Dad, July 2019. And on the right, I see a list of all the clients that I added to the group a moment ago. Now that's only the first half. I still need to indicate the type of service this was. So I need to indicate this was a 24/7 Dad workshop. It was just one workshop, and I'm going to put the start and end date for this workshop here because it's a series. So it might have lasted over the course of 2 weeks or however long it took. And I'm still stuck in 2018, so I'll update that. I will put the total duration of the workshop. So if the whole workshop was 8 hours, I would be adding up all the time from all the sessions and putting it there in the duration. Once I've filled out these fields, the most important step here at this point is to click Add Service to Selected Group. Because all we've done so far is just set up the group and tell Persimmony who attended, but we haven't done the final step of officially adding that service to these participants. So if you don't click this button at the bottom, add service to selected group, the services won't show up for your clients. So if you're wondering, or you're running a report and you're saying, my workshop numbers are looking really low, I would just confirm the process of data entry to confirm this button is being pushed at the end. So I'm going to press this now. It's going to say, this will add the 24/7 dad service to these group members. Are you sure? You say, yes, we're sure. And now we're done with adding that workshop. We set up the group and we added the service to these participants. If we want to be 100% sure that that worked, I can click on a client for my group and then click the services button. And I will see a full list of all the services that client has gotten. So this client actually has a lot of services, but I see at the very top is the one we just added. This is that 24/7 dad that started on June 20th that we just entered, so I know that worked. So you can check to confirm that your process worked for data entry by clicking on their name and clicking services and saying, yes, the workshop that I tried to add indeed did work. So that's a nice way to check your work. So like I said, this does require a few steps, and the first couple times you add workshops, I would recommend using the training or documentation, but it does get easier after you do it a few times. So I'm going to exit back and go to my front screen. Now, if your program adds community events, you will find them in the performance measures section at the top. To add a community event, you just select community event. And then you need to select the aggregate data button for the quarter the event occurred in. So if I want to add an event from June 2019, I will click the aggregate data button for Q4, and I will add a new one. It will always be manual because you're entering this information yourself. So I indicate the date that the event occurred on, and I can name it. I will now indicate how many participants attended. So if there were, and this is an estimate, 50 0 to 3, 53 to 5, and maybe 100 parents. Again, these are estimates. We do not expect that you're using sign-in sheets because community events are meant to be much larger events where you're not tracking each person individually. Then we ask you to just estimate the ethnicity and language breakdown of your participants. This is important for our state reporting and to better understand a community. And you can add as many or as few ethnicities as you'd like from these drop downs. The most important thing is as you're adding this information, it needs to total the number in the top row. So if you indicated 50 0 to 3, then this leftmost column must add up to 50, which Persimmony will do for you. Next, you indicate the primary language. Again, these are estimates, and they need to add up to the total row. If you are aware of any children with special needs, please indicate that below as well for our state reporting. Now, for a community event, you do not need to indicate the zip code, so you can leave that blank. And once it is complete, you can hit the exit button and it will have saved it for you. If I go back to my aggregate data screen, I'll see the nutrition fair that I just added. So if I exit completely and go back to the front screen, I see that we've covered now most of the functionality that you'll be using Persimmony for. If you want information on how to run reports or how to use performance measures to submit contract documents, those are covered in other training materials. Thank you.